My name is Freda Harrison, 34 years old, and I was about to watch my younger brother Maxwell graduate from Naval Academy. After years of estrangement, I arrived in my dress uniform, heart pounding with hope for reconciliation. But when I approached the entrance, the security guard frowned. "I am sorry, ma'am, you are not on the list." My brother Maxwell appeared, glancing at the guest list. "She is not even on the list," he laughed dismissively. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you are watching from, and subscribe if stories about family vindication inspire you. Growing up in Portland, our family dynamic was clear from the beginning. Excellence was not just encouraged, but expected, especially by my father William, a retired Navy captain, and my mother Eleanor, who had sacrificed her own military aspirations to raise children. But the expectations were never equal between Maxwell and me. From the day Maxwell was born just 3 years after me, he became the center of our family universe. While most siblings experience some degree of rivalry, ours was different. It was not that my parents did not love me, but rather that they had different visions for us. For Maxwell, they envisioned medals, command positions, and a distinguished military career. For me, they suggested teaching, nursing, or perhaps administrative roles that they deemed more suitable for a daughter. Freda set the table for dinner, my mother would call, while Maxwell sat undisturbed with his studies. "Your brother needs to focus on his physics homework. The Naval Academy has high standards." This was our routine, even though I maintained a perfect 4.0 GPA throughout high school and expressed interest in naval service from the age of 12. My father would pat me on the head when I mentioned following in his footsteps. "The military is tough for women, Freda," he would say. "Maxwell has the temperament for it. You should consider something that plays to your strengths." My strengths apparently did not include leadership, strategy, or service, despite being captain of the debate team and organizing community service initiatives that earned recognition from the mayor. One particular dinner stands out in my memory. I was 16 and Maxwell 13. I had just won a regional essay contest on national security challenges, earning a scholarship opportunity and invitation to a summer program at Georgetown. "That is wonderful, Freda," my mother said, serving pot roast. "That will look good on your college applications for education programs." Before I could respond, my father turned to Maxwell. "Son, guess who I ran into today? Admiral Johnson. He remembers you from the Navy Day event and asked about you specifically. Said you asked some impressive questions for a young man." Maxwell beamed, and the conversation shifted entirely to his potential military career path for the next 40 minutes. My achievement gathered dust like an unwanted ornament. When I turned 18, I made my decision. Without consulting my parents, I enlisted in the Navy. Not through officer candidate school as my father would have preferred for Maxwell, but as an enlisted sailor. I wanted to earn my way from the ground up. The fallout was significant. My mother cried for days. My father lectured me about wasting potential and making impulsive decisions. Maxwell watched from the sidelines, confused by the intensity of their reaction to my choice when military service was so valued in our family. "You will wash out within 6 months," my father predicted during our last conversation before I shipped out to boot camp. "The enlisted ranks are not what you think, Freda. You are being stubborn for no reason." I left with those words ringing in my ears, determined to prove him wrong, but deeply hurt by the lack of support. Meanwhile, Maxwell followed the golden path laid out for him. Princeton undergraduate degree internships with congressional defense committees, and finally the Naval Academy officer training program that my parents had always envisioned. Each Christmas and Thanksgiving brought updates of his accomplishments, while questions about my service were perfunctory at best. "Are you still enjoying the Navy, Freda?" my mother would ask, already turning toward Maxwell to hear about his latest achievement before I could fully answer. Over 10 years, our communication dwindled to obligatory holiday calls and the occasional email. I sent cards for birthdays and achievements. They sent generic holiday greetings addressed to Freda and colleagues, as if unsure whether I had friends or a life they should acknowledge. The invitation to Maxwell's graduation ceremony arrived 3 weeks before the event, an electronic notification that appeared to be sent to a bulk list of contacts. The personal note attached read, simply, "Family should be present for important moments. There will be a reception afterward, at the Colonial Restaurant. Business attire required." Business attire. Not even an acknowledgement that I would be in uniform as an active duty service member. But still I felt a flutter of hope. Perhaps this was an olive branch, a chance to rebuild the bridges that had crumbled between us. After a decade of separation, I wanted to believe we could find our way back to some version of family that included genuine respect. I confirmed my attendance immediately and began making arrangements for leave from my current assignment. I did not share details about my role or rank, assuming they neither knew nor cared about my advancement. This ceremony was about Maxwell after all. I would attend support his achievement and perhaps begin healing old wounds. What I did not expect was to be left off the guest list entirely, as if my confirmation had been discarded or overlooked, as if I remained the afterthought I had always been in our family narrative. The morning of the ceremony dawned bright and clear. I awoke in my hotel room near the Naval Academy, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. A good omen, I thought naively. A new day. A new beginning for our family. I prepared, meticulously showering and styling my hair in the tight regulation bun that had become second nature over the years. I applied minimal makeup, just enough to look polished but professional. Then came the uniform pressed to perfection, ribbons and insignia positioned precisely. I had considered wearing civilian attire as the invitation implied, but this was a military ceremony, and I was an active duty naval officer. Protocol and personal pride demanded the uniform. As I fastened the last button, memories surfaced of family gatherings where I felt like a ghost. My 21st birthday, when my parents spent most of the dinner discussing Maxwell's college applications. My father's retirement ceremony, where I was introduced simply as our daughter, while Maxwell received a glowing introduction, highlighting his academic achievements. My mother's 60th birthday, where conversations steered around me as if I were made of smoke. Today will be different, I told my reflection. I am not that invisible girl anymore. The drive to the academy took 20 minutes. I parked in the visitor section, noting the festive atmosphere. Families in their Sunday best clustered together, taking photos and sharing proud embraces. A few active duty and retired military personnel nodded respectfully as they noticed my uniform and ribbons. These small acknowledgments from strangers stood in stark contrast to what awaited me at the entrance. The Naval Academy grounds were immaculate colonial architecture, standing proudly against the blue sky. Flags snapped in the breeze, and the atmosphere hummed with significance. This was hallowed ground for naval officers, the place where leadership was forged. Despite everything, I felt a surge of pride knowing my brother had completed this rigorous program. At the reception desk, a young ensign greeted me with a crisp, "Good morning, ma'am. Name for check-in, please." "Freda Harrison," I replied, returning his professional courtesy. "Here for midshipman, Maxwell Harrison's graduation." The ensign scanned his tablet, frowning slightly. He scrolled, then scrolled again. "I apologize, ma'am. I do not see your name on the approved guest list." "There must be a mistake," I said, maintaining composure. "I RSVP'd 3 weeks ago. I am Maxwell Harrison's sister." "One moment, please." He stepped aside to consult with a superior, their hushed conversation punctuated by glances in my direction. While waiting, I noticed my parents arriving. My mother elegant in a navy blue dress. My father distinguished in a suit with his veteran's pin on the lapel. Maxwell accompanied them, already in his midshipman's uniform, looking every inch the naval officer my parents had groomed him to be. The security guard approached them briefly, then pointed in my direction. Maxwell frowned, excused himself from our parents, and walked over, his posture stiff. "Freda," he said, his tone more confused than welcoming. "What is going on?" "Apparently, I am not on the guest list," I explained. "There must have been an oversight when I RSVP'd." Maxwell took the tablet from the ensign, scanning it himself. Several people nearby had begun to notice the interaction, their curious glances adding to my discomfort. "She is not even on the list," Maxwell laughed, the sound cutting through me like winter wind. "Look, Freda, this section is for family of graduates and specially invited military guests. It is invitation only." I was invited. I insisted, pulling out my phone to show the email. I confirmed my attendance. Maxwell glanced at it dismissively. "Well, something got mixed up in the system. This section is full now anyway. Maybe you can find standing room in the back." He handed the tablet back to the ensign. "Sorry about the confusion. My sister is not on the approved list." The humiliation burned through me, as nearby attendees pretended not to overhear. My parents had not even bothered to come over, remaining in conversation with another couple, occasionally glancing our way with expressions of mild annoyance. In that moment, I considered leaving, walking away from this final slight, and accepting that some family relationships cannot be salvaged. The rational part of me argued that pride was not worth prolonging this painful chapter. The wounded part remembered the 18-year-old girl who left home with her father's prediction of failure echoing in her ears. "I will find a place in the standing section," I said, my voice steady, despite the emotions churning beneath. "Congratulations on your graduation, Maxwell." He nodded already, turning back toward our parents and the comfort of their approval. "Sure. Thanks for coming." I made my way to the back of the ceremonial hall, finding a spot against the wall where I could observe without being noticed. From this distance, I watched my family take their seats in the special front section reserved for graduates' immediate relatives. They did not look back or search the crowd for me. The contrast between their behavior and what I had hoped for settled into a heavy resignation. I had achieved so much since leaving home, advanced through the ranks faster than anyone expected, taken on assignments that tested every limit of my capabilities. Yet here, in the presence of my family, I reverted to the invisible daughter, the lesser child, the afterthought. Still, I remained standing tall in my uniform, refusing to let their oversight diminish my own accomplishments or my presence at this event. Maxwell had completed a challenging program and was stepping into his naval career. Despite our complicated relationship, I could respect that achievement. As the ceremony prepared to begin, I centered myself in that thought. I was here as a naval officer, paying respect to new officers entering the service. The family dynamics were secondary to the tradition and meaning of the day. I would observe the ceremony with professional dignity, even from my position at the back of the hall. The Naval Academy graduation ceremony began with all the pomp and circumstance befitting an institution with such storied history. Midshipmen marched in perfect formation, their white uniforms gleaming under the lights of the hall. The discipline and precision on display would have impressed even the most demanding drill instructor. From my position against the back wall, I observed with both professional appreciation and personal conflict. Every naval officer remembers their commissioning ceremony as a defining moment, the culmination of years of training, and the beginning of their oath of service. Despite everything, I felt a twinge of pride knowing Maxwell had earned his place in this tradition. The Academy superintendent took the podium, his chest adorned with rows of ribbons that told the story of a distinguished career. His welcome address emphasized the responsibility these new officers were assuming, the legacy they now carried. "Today you join the ranks of those who have stood watch over our nation for nearly 250 years, he proclaimed, his voice carrying throughout the hall. "You will lead our sailors, represent our values, and carry our flag to distant shores." As he spoke, I noted several high-ranking officers entering through a side door, taking positions near the stage. Among them was Vice Admiral Nathaniel Gordon, commander of Naval Special Warfare Command, whose presence suggested this class had notable graduates headed for sensitive assignments. My family sat prominently in the front row section, my mother occasionally dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief, my father sitting ramrod straight, as if at attention himself. Maxwell was seated with his graduating class, visible pride emanating from his posture. The ceremony progressed through various recognitions and awards. When Maxwell's name was called for graduating with distinction, ranking in the top 5% of his class, My parents beamed visibly. I applauded quietly from my distant position, genuinely impressed by his achievement. After individual recognitions concluded, the Academy commander approached the microphone to introduce special guests in attendance. This was standard protocol acknowledging senior military leadership and distinguished visitors before the main commissioning. We are honored today by the presence of several distinguished guests. He began listing various dignitaries and senior officers. I listened with polite interest, expecting nothing relevant to me personally. Then came the unexpected. We are particularly honored to have with us today Rear Admiral Freda Harrison, recently promoted following her successful command of Special Naval Intelligence Operation Clearwater. Admiral Harrison is also the sister of Midshipman Maxwell Harrison, graduating today. A murmur rippled through the crowd as hundreds of heads turned, searching the audience. I remained frozen in place, unsure how to respond. My carefully maintained anonymity within my family suddenly stripped away without warning. Vice Admiral Gordon stood from his seat near the stage, scanning the crowd until his eyes found me at the back of the hall. He frowned, clearly displeased with my positioning. "Admiral Freda," he called, his authoritative voice cutting through the murmurs. "Front row seat, please. We do not keep flag officers standing at the back." Every eye in the hall turned to follow his gaze. I straightened, my already perfect posture, years of training taking over despite my internal turmoil. With measured steps, I began walking down the center aisle toward the front, acutely aware of the shocked expressions tracking my movement. My family sat frozen in the front row. My mother's mouth had fallen open slightly, her hand gripping my father's arm. My father stared as if seeing a ghost, his face transitioning through confusion to disbelief. And Maxwell, visible from where I approached, had gone rigid in his seat, his hand trembling slightly as he gripped the ceremony program. The truth that I had never shared with them was now crashing down in the most public way possible. After years of being dismissed as the family disappointment, my achievement was being announced to hundreds of people, including my stunned family. Junior officers scrambled to make space in the front row, a seat quickly vacated and offered to me with deference I had grown accustomed to, but which clearly shocked onlookers familiar with my family. As I took my seat just 2 spaces away from my parents, the Academy commander continued, as if this disruption were perfectly normal. "Admiral Harrison's contributions to national security operations over the past 5 years have been exceptional, though many details remain classified. Her recent promotion makes her one of the youngest flag officers currently serving in naval intelligence." The ceremony resumed, but the atmosphere had fundamentally changed. Throughout the hall, whispers and glances continued as people processed the unexpected revelation. The invisible sister had returned as a rear admiral, outranking most officers in the room, including those on stage, save for a select few. Taking my seat in the front row created a surreal barrier of empty chairs between me and my family. No one moved to close the gap. My mother stared straight ahead, her earlier tears dried in shock. My father sat unnaturally still, his jaw clenched tight enough to crack walnuts. Neither acknowledged me directly, though their awareness of my presence radiated like heat. General Gordon nodded approvingly as I settled into my assigned seat, then leaned toward the Academy commander, whispering something that made both men glance in my direction. The commander nodded and made a note on his speaking cards. When the ceremony continued, additional unexpected references to my career emerged, each one deepening the chasm of silence between me and my family. "We are particularly honored today to have leadership from multiple generations of naval service present," the commander noted during his address, "including Rear Admiral Harrison, whose work in counterintelligence operations has recently been recognized with the Distinguished Service Medal, though the specific actions remain classified." Each revelation landed like a depth charge in the placid waters of my family's assumptions. I had never shared these accomplishments with them, not because they were classified, though many details were, but because they had never asked. Our conversations over the years had been so superficial, so focused on Maxwell's path that discussing my own advancement seemed pointless at best, self-aggrandizing at worst. As the ceremony progressed, I caught glimpses of Maxwell. His expression had shifted from shock to something more complex, a mixture of confusion and what appeared to be anger simmering beneath his composed exterior. The trembling in his hand had stopped, replaced by a white-knuckled grip on his cover when not in use. I thought back to key moments in my career that my family had missed entirely. My first command position at 28, extraordinarily young for such responsibility. The covert operation in the South China Sea that resulted in my first major commendation. The leadership role during the crisis that could not be named but had made headlines when resolved, without the public ever knowing how close we had come to conflict. Through each advancement, each challenge overcome, I had carried the weight of my father's prediction of failure. That weight had transformed over time from a burden to a kind of fuel, driving me to excel beyond what even I had imagined possible. Now, ironically, that fuel was igniting an explosion in the carefully maintained narrative my family had constructed about me. When Maxwell's turn came to speak as class valedictorian, he approached the podium with rigid precision. His prepared remarks began smoothly enough, thanking instructors, mentioning classmates, acknowledging the journey ahead. Then came the part about family influence. I would like to thank my parents, whose guidance and example led me to this path of service, he said, his voice steady, but lacking its earlier warmth. And to acknowledge family inspiration that reminds us that service takes many forms and follows unexpected paths. It was a careful amendment, likely adjusted on the spot, acknowledging my presence, without directly addressing the elephant now seated prominently in the ceremonial hall. His discomfort was palpable beneath the professional delivery. After the speeches concluded, the formal commissioning began. Each graduate received their officer's commission, transforming from midshipman to ensign in the United States Navy. When Maxwell's name was called, our parents stood as tradition dictated for family members. After a moment's hesitation, I stood as well. Our eyes met briefly as he returned from receiving his commission. In that moment, I saw the full impact of the revelation washing over him. All the years he had accepted our parents' narrative about his superior potential, all the times he had casually dismissed my service as less significant than his academic preparation, all the assumptions about our respective places in life, the family hierarchy, and the larger naval community, all collapsing under the weight of reality. The truth had indeed hit hard. The sister who could not make the guest list outranked nearly everyone at his graduation, including him by several substantial levels of command authority. As the ceremony concluded, and the newly commissioned officers were dismissed, I remained in my seat, allowing the crowd to begin dispersing before navigating the inevitable confrontation. Admiral Gordon approached, extending his hand. "Admiral Harrison, good to see you here. I did not realize the graduating Harrison was your brother until this morning, when reviewing the program. Quite the coincidence." "Thank you, sir. Yes, quite unexpected," I replied, aware that my family had paused their departure and was watching this interaction from a short distance away. "Your work on the Clearwater operation was exceptional. The CNO speaks very highly of your analytical approach. We should discuss your insights on the Baltic situation sometime soon." "I would be honored, sir." He nodded and moved on, leaving me facing the unavoidable moment with my family. Maxwell had joined our parents, the three of them standing in a tight cluster, their expressions a study in complicated emotions. The reception awaited, and with it the confrontation that had been brewing since Admiral Gordon had first called my name. The reception following the ceremony was held in a grand hall adorned with naval history. Portraits of distinguished admirals lined the walls, silent witnesses to generations of service and sacrifice. Under normal circumstances, this would have been a joyous occasion, families celebrating their graduates' achievements, newly commissioned officers enjoying their first moments of official status. For me, it was a minefield of awkward encounters. Several parents of other graduates approached me, suddenly eager to introduce themselves to the Admiral they had not noticed standing at the back of the hall earlier. "Admiral Harrison, such an honor to meet you," gushed the mother of one of Maxwell's classmates. "My husband served under Admiral Kettering in the Pacific Fleet. Did you know him?" "Yes, ma'am. Admiral Kettering was one of my early mentors," I replied, politely accepting the unexpected deference with practiced grace. "Is it true you were involved in that situation last year with the intelligence breach? The papers said a female admiral was instrumental in containing it." "I am afraid I cannot comment on specific operations," I said, my standard response to such inquiries. These interactions continued, each one undoubtedly observed by my family, who remained across the room in their own cluster of conversations. I noticed Maxwell growing increasingly tense, his formal smile tightening each time someone else approached me with evident respect. Eventually, he excused himself from our parents and made his way toward the refreshment table where I stood momentarily alone. His approach was direct, his newly conferred officer's bearing on full display. "Admiral," he said, the formal address carrying a bitter edge. "May I speak with you privately?" We moved to a relatively quiet corner, near a display of historic naval battle maps. For a moment neither of us spoke, the weight of unspoken history hanging between us. "You could have warned us," Maxwell finally said, his voice low but intense. "You humiliated me at my own graduation ceremony." "How exactly did I humiliate you, Maxwell?" I kept my tone neutral, genuinely curious about his perspective. "Everyone now knows. My sister outranks me by what? 5 pay grades, that I had no idea about your position or accomplishments. You made us look like fools." I made no announcement. I arrived in my correct uniform with appropriate insignia. I did not even expect to be recognized or called forward. "You could have told us before today." A simple email saying, "By the way, I am a Rear Admiral now." Was that too much to ask? The irony of his demand struck me forcefully. After years of superficial communication, after being literally left off the guest list for his graduation, he expected proactive updates about my career advancement. When exactly should I have shared this information? Maxwell. During the 30-second Christmas calls, in response to birthday cards, addressed to Freda, with no acknowledgement of my service, or perhaps when confirming my attendance. At this ceremony where I was subsequently left off the guest list entirely. His expression flickered between anger and discomfort. That was an administrative oversight. Was it? Or was it symptomatic of how I have been an afterthought in this family since you were born? Our parents had noticed our tense conversation and were making their way toward us. My mother's eyes were red-rimmed, though whether from emotion or embarrassment remained unclear. My father walked with the same stiff bearing he had maintained throughout the ceremony. "Freda," my mother began hesitantly as they joined us. "We had no idea. All these years you never said anything about promotions or becoming an admiral. When did you ask Mom?" The question came out softer than I intended, the accumulated hurt of years seeping through. "When did any of you ask about my career beyond the most superficial inquiries that moved on before I could answer?" "That is unfair," my father interjected, finding his voice at last. "We always supported your decision to enlist." "Did you? Your last words to me before I left for boot camp were that I would wash out within 6 months. His face reddened. That was concern, not criticism. "It was a prediction of failure, Dad. One I have carried with me through every promotion, every challenge, every commendation." Maxwell shook his head. "So this was all about proving us wrong. Showing up today, as Admiral Harrison, to get revenge for perceived slights." "If I wanted revenge, Maxwell, I would have requested to present your commission personally. I would have announced my rank when confirming my attendance. I would have done anything other than stand quietly at the back of the hall until someone else recognized me." "Then why keep it secret from us? Why not share your success?" My mother's question seemed genuinely confused, as if the answer were not written in every holiday interaction, every abbreviated call, every conversation that centered on Maxwell's path while treating mine as an awkward detour. "Because you never asked," I said simply. "In 10 years, not once did any of you ask about promotions or accomplishments or challenges. You asked if I was still enjoying the Navy, as if it were a summer camp I attended rather than my career and life's purpose." A heavy silence fell between us, broken when Admiral Kettering approached, unaware of the family drama unfolding. "Harrison," he called cheerfully, then paused, looking between Maxwell and me. "Well, I suppose that is both of you now. Admiral Harrison, the CNO, was hoping to speak with you before you leave. Something about the Singapore proposal." "Thank you, Admiral. I will find him shortly," I responded. After he departed, my father stared at me with new eyes. "The Chief of Naval Operations wants to speak with you personally about operational matters." "Yes." "How long have you been an admiral?" my mother asked quietly. "I received my first star 18 months ago. The promotion to Rear Admiral Upper Half came through last month following Operation Clearwater." "And before that," Maxwell pressed. "Captain for 3 years. Commander for 2 before that." My father's naval background made these rapid promotions significant to him, in a way the others might not fully grasp. His expression shifted from defensive to something approaching reverence. "That is an accelerated advancement track," he said almost to himself. "Exceptionally accelerated." Before our conversation could continue, the Academy commander approached, addressing me directly. "Admiral Harrison, the secretary, has arrived, and is asking for you specifically. I believe he wants your perspective on the training modifications you proposed last quarter." I nodded. "Please tell him I will be there momentarily." As the commander left, I turned back to my family. "I need to go. This is not how I would have chosen for you to learn about my career, but perhaps it is better to have everything in the open now." "Freda, wait," my mother began, but I gently cut her off. "I am still the same person I was this morning, when I was left standing at the back of the hall. Remember that." I straightened my uniform jacket. "Congratulations on your commission, Ensign Harrison. I wish you fair winds and following seas." With that, I walked away from them toward my professional obligations, leaving my family to process their shattered assumptions. The trembling in Maxwell's hands, my father's stunned expression, my mother's tears all receded as I rejoined the senior leadership, where, ironically, I had earned my place long ago. The days following the graduation ceremony unfolded in unexpected ways. I extended my leave by 2 days, remaining in Annapolis, rather than immediately returning to my command as originally planned. Something told me this fragile moment of revelation required space for potential healing, assuming any was possible. I was reviewing intelligence briefings in my hotel room when a text message arrived from my mother, asking if we could meet for coffee. Progress, I thought, noting it was the first time she had initiated contact in years rather than responding to my outreach. We met at a small cafe near the harbor, away from the academy grounds and its reminders of rank and ceremony. She arrived first, looking smaller, somehow more uncertain than I remembered. "Thank you for meeting me," she said as I sat down across from her. "I was not sure you would want to." "Why would you think that?" She stirred her coffee, avoiding my eyes. "Because we have been horrible to you, Freda. Not intentionally, but thoughtlessly, which is perhaps worse." Her admission surprised me. I had expected defensiveness or attempts to reframe the past in more flattering terms. This direct acknowledgement was refreshingly honest. "What made you realize that?" I asked. "Watching you walk down that aisle yesterday, seeing the respect in everyone's eyes, hearing about your achievements, and realizing we knew nothing about your life." She looked up finally. "Then going home and finding all your letters and cards saved in my keepsake box, reading them again, and seeing how they changed over the years, becoming more formal, more distant, telling us less and less because we never asked for more." She reached into her purse and pulled out a faded photograph. "Remember this?" It showed me at age 10 in my father's officer's cover, saluting seriously at the camera. My childhood dream captured in faded color. You always wanted to serve, she continued. William and we thought we were protecting you by steering you toward other paths. The Navy can be cruel to women, especially then. But we were wrong to discourage your dream, and even more wrong to stop seeing you once you pursued it anyway. Her apology was unexpected, touching something deep that I had walled off years ago. I did not need you to help advance my career, Mom. I just needed you to be interested in it. I know that now, she whispered. I am so sorry, Freda. We talked for nearly 3 hours, covering ground that should have been traversed years earlier. She asked questions about my assignments, my challenges, my achievements. I shared what I could without breaching security protocols, painting a picture of the life she had missed. Your father wants to talk to you too, she said as our meeting concluded. He is struggling with his pride, but he will call. He spent all night researching your career, everything that is publicly available. True to her word, my father called that evening. His approach was more reserved, his military bearing evident even through the phone. Rear Admiral, he began formally, then caught himself. Freda, I owe you an apology for my prediction when you enlisted. I was wrong. Spectacularly wrong. Thank you, Dad. That means a lot. I should have supported your path from the beginning. I let my own biases cloud my judgment. We spoke for nearly an hour, his questions more technical than my mother's, focusing on leadership challenges and strategic decisions. Behind the military discussion, I sensed his struggle to reconcile his daughter with the flag officer I had become. I am proud of you, Freda, he said finally. I should have said that years ago and many times since. Maxwell proved the most complicated. He requested meeting for lunch the following day, choosing a restaurant far from both the academy and the naval base. When I arrived, he was already seated in civilian clothes rather than his new uniform. I do not know whether to call you Freda or Admiral, he said as I sat down. Freda is fine. We are family before we are ranks. He nodded, a muscle working in his jaw. That is part of the problem. Is not it? I never treated you as family first. I accepted the narrative that I was the star, the future of our family's naval tradition. You did not create that narrative, Maxwell. You were a child when it began. But I perpetuated it as an adult. He stared at his water glass. Yesterday was a shock, but also a mirror. I saw myself through others' eyes for the first time, and I did not like what I saw. His candor surprised me. What did you see? An entitled young officer who dismissed his sister's service while trading on family connections. Who laughed about you not being on a guest list when you outranked virtually everyone in the room. He looked up. I was ashamed, Freda. Not of you, but of myself. You have just commissioned, Maxwell. Your career is beginning. There is time to become the officer and person you want to be. Did you really not tell us about your promotions because we never asked? I thought about the many times I had started to share news, only to have conversations redirected to his accomplishments. There were moments I tried, but they did not land. After a while, it seemed pointless to keep trying. Like the Christmas call 3 years ago, he said suddenly. You mentioned a new assignment, and Dad immediately asked about my thesis. You remember that? I have been reviewing a lot of memories since yesterday. They look different now. We talked about specific instances when communication had failed, moments when bridges might have been built, had any of us approached differently. I shared stories about critical points in my career, when family support would have meant everything. He spoke of the pressure of being the anointed one, the burden of expectations I had never fully understood. I am not sure we can fix everything, he admitted as our lunch concluded. But I would like to try being actual siblings, rather than competing narratives. I would like that too, I said, meaning it despite the years of distance. When I returned to my command position 2 days later, the story of the graduation revelation had preceded me. My executive officer, Commander Rachel Taylor, greeted me with a knowing smile. So the family finally knows they have an admiral in their midst. News travels fast, I observed. Officers gossip worse than sailors sometimes. She handed me a stack of reports. For what it is worth, I think they are lucky to have you, whether they realized it or not. Thank you, Rachel. That evening, reviewing operational plans in my office, I reflected on the whirlwind of the past week. The family I had given up on knowing me had been forced to see me clearly for the first time in decades. The pain of years could not be erased in a few conversations, but something had shifted, creating space for a new kind of relationship defined by who we actually were, rather than who they had decided I should be. Whether that space would fill with genuine connection or fade back into comfortable distance remained to be seen. But for the first time in years, I felt hopeful about the possibility of family that included real respect, not just obligation. 6 months passed quickly, filled with operational demands and the constant responsibilities of command. The changes in my family dynamic evolved gradually, but noticeably, like a ship slowly altering course toward better waters. Communication patterns shifted first. My mother began sending regular emails, asking specific questions about my work to the extent I could share. My father forwarded articles about naval intelligence, occasionally adding notes about how proud certain developments made him. Maxwell and I established a monthly video call, navigating our new relationship as both siblings and fellow officers, though separated by significant rank. When Christmas approached, I received a formal invitation to join the family gathering, rather than the perfunctory assumption of my absence that had become tradition. I arranged leave and arrived at my parents' home with carefully chosen gifts and cautious optimism. The difference was immediately apparent. In the living room, alongside the many photos of Maxwell in uniform and at various academic achievements, new frames displayed articles about my promotion and the public ceremony where I received my second star. My Naval Academy graduation photo, absent for years now, held a prominent position on the mantel. "We found it in storage," my mother explained, noticing my surprise. "It belongs with the family, not in a box." My father had created a shadow box, displaying the public commendations I had received, positioned beside his own service medals. This visual acknowledgement of my service meant more than any words could express. Maxwell arrived last, having driven from his first posting as an ensign aboard the USS Lincoln. His greeting was warm, the competitive edge that had defined our relationship notably absent. During dinner, when conversation turned to naval matters, he actively deferred to my experience on several points, a small but significant recognition of our respective positions. Freda was explaining to me last month about command decision frameworks, he told our parents. It completely changed how I approach my division responsibilities. These small acknowledgments accumulated throughout the holiday, creating a new family narrative where both children had value, both paths deserved respect. The healing was not complete, perhaps never would be entirely, but the worst wounds had begun to close. The most profound change became evident during a private conversation with my father as we stood on the back porch watching snow fall gently in the garden. "I never told you why I predicted you would fail in the Navy," he said, suddenly breaking a comfortable silence. "I assumed it was because you thought women could not succeed in military service." He shook his head. "It was because I saw myself in you, Freda. The same determination, the same strategic mind, the same unwillingness to accept limitations." He looked at me directly. "I was afraid you would face the barriers I did, but multiplied because of your gender. I thought I was protecting you by discouraging you. Instead, you became my first barrier," I observed without rancor. "Yes," he acknowledged. "The very thing I feared becoming. I am sorry for that more than I can express." "I forgive you, Dad. And maybe you were right in one way. Having to overcome your doubt prepared me for doubters throughout my career." He smiled sadly, a silver lining I never intended. Beyond my biological family, my relationships with my chosen family in the military had also strengthened. Commander Rachel Taylor had become both a trusted colleague and friend, someone who knew my capabilities without the distorting lens of childhood history. Your brother called the command center last week. She mentioned during a rare quiet moment between operations. He wanted advice on a training protocol. Did you help him? I did after thoroughly vetting his security clearance, she smiled. He seems to be working hard to establish himself on his own merits, rather than family connections. That speaks well of his character development. He is finding his way, I agreed, pleased by this independent confirmation of Maxwell's growth. As winter turned to spring, I found myself mentoring a young female lieutenant, who reminded me of myself at that stage. During one advisory session, she expressed frustration about family members who did not value her naval career. My parents keep asking when I am going to get a real job on land, she confessed. How do you handle that kind of fundamental misunderstanding of your life's purpose? I considered her question carefully, drawing on my own hard-won wisdom. For years, I sought validation from people who were not equipped to give it. I measured my worth by their recognition, which never came. The freedom arrived when I stopped needing their approval to know my own value. That sounds lonely, she observed. It was at times, but it also opened space for authentic relationships with people who could see me clearly. And eventually, it created room for my family to see me differently too when they were ready. And are they ready now? They are learning, I smiled. As am I. The deepest lesson from the graduation ceremony confrontation, and its aftermath, was not about family reconciliation, though that was precious. It was about the liberation that comes from living authentically, without contorting yourself to meet others' limited expectations. For years I had carried my father's prediction of failure as a weight. Over time, that weight had transformed into fuel for achievement, but it had still been external motivation, still giving power to someone else's assessment of my potential. The final freedom came in, recognizing that my accomplishments were valuable because of the service they represented. The missions completed, the sailors led the difference made, not because they proved anyone wrong. In June, I received new orders, a significant command that would require relocation and expanded responsibilities. When I called to tell my family, they responded with genuine pride and interest, asking thoughtful questions about the assignment and its challenges. We will need to plan visits to your new location, my mother said. Perhaps around the formal change of command ceremony. I would like that, I replied, noting how different this felt from previous transitions they had barely acknowledged. As I packed my office for the move, I came across an old photograph tucked in a desk drawer taken during my first week of boot camp. The uncertain young woman in the image looked back at me across 15 years of growth, challenge, and achievement. We made it, I told her silently. Not to prove them wrong, but because this was always our path. My phone rang, a secure line indicating an important operational matter. As I answered and stepped into my authority, I carried with me the hard-won understanding that our worth never depended on others' recognition of it. The truth of who we are exists independent of whether anyone else can see it clearly. Sometimes that truth hits hard when finally revealed, shaking foundations and challenging assumptions. But in that disruption lies the possibility of authentic connection, of being known for who you truly are rather than who others need you to be. Have you ever experienced a moment when your true value was suddenly recognized after being overlooked for years? How did it change your relationships? Share your story in the comments below, and do not forget to subscribe for more real-life journeys of resilience and redemption. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that your worth exists whether others recognize it or not. Like this video if it resonated with you, and share it with someone who might need this reminder today.